It's the boy, Bubba Lutz, coming through. Hella clutch, flawless, can't be touched. It's your boy, Bubba Lutz. Yeah, I need that hot take. I need the truth and everything that is not fake. So tell me who's the GOAT. I'll tell you.
Welcome back, Bubba Bunch, to another edition of the Bubba Lutz Sports Podcast. It is episode 258, and we are finally getting to the review of the Thanksgiving game between the Raiders and the Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunately, the Cowboys drop another one back-to-back in less than a week. Raiders get the win 36-33. And look, in the moment, I'm gonna help a lot of these Cowboys fans out. And I hope that a lot of you are Cowboys fans, because I feel like you're in the same boat as me. Not really understanding why this team started off so well, and it seems like a clusterfuck now. But on Thursday night, after that game, just pure anger and frustration, obviously, throughout the game as well. Not just with the team, with the whole game, the refs, all of that. And then the following days that have transpired, and as of today on Monday, the 29th, we get the news that Mccarthy will not be coaching the Thursday night game against the Saints, so we have another early week game. So we'll do a preview for that later on this week. But Mike McCarthy does have COVID. He tested positive for it, so he will not be at the game on Thursday. You got a lot of guys injured. You got a lot of coaches that are testing positive for COVID or on the COVID list for the last few weeks. So it feels like everything's going against the Cowboys right now. And I felt like this was a game that just wasn't meant to be a win. You know, as much as I want to complain about how bad this offense looked, about how this defense and how Anthony Brown couldn't stop anything, you know, really, I think we're just in a time right now where every single one of these NFL teams are going to have bad times throughout the season. You know, like Kansas City, they had a rough first half of the season. And now they look unstoppable. Now they look like the former Super Bowl champs, Super Bowl contending Kansas City Chiefs. And Patrick Mahomes is playing at an elite level, right? So everything's fine there. It was just a rough patch. Tampa Bay has lost 2 in a row. Or they were losing 2 in a row. And now you feel like it's just back to normal. Everything's good. Green Bay, rough week 1. And ever since then, they've been dominant. But like the Rams, you know, the Rams started off hot. They're just struggling right now, 3 losses in a row. So you can't say that the Dallas Cowboys are any different from the rest of the NFC or really a lot of the AFC teams. Patriots, probably the best team in all of football right now alongside the Packers. Clearly the best team in all of the AFC. And they started off with a losing record for much of that first month. And going into that Cowboys game, that was a must-win. They lost. And see where they are now. So this is a very unpredictable season, much like last year. But this year, it's just more confusing to a lot of people just because of the fact that you don't really have the excuse of the COVID situation, or a lot of teams have the injury bug. It's more of just how they're playing and how any given Sunday a Jacksonville Jaguars team is suddenly beating the Bills. And they go and dominate the Saints on Thanksgiving. It just makes no sense at all. You're seeing teams like the Jets, the Texans, these teams, like the Lions. The Lions could have won at least 4 games by now if they had just finished these games. And they could have been beating some really good talent like the Ravens, like the Bengals. Like these are teams that they could beat if they had just finished those games. So I'm not freaking out about the Cowboys at all right now. I was driving home right now, had a good day, and I saw something about the Cowboys and about Mike McCarthy and how I saw a Reddit thread of Kirk Cousins being compared to Tony Romo. You know, being good, but not good enough or elite enough. That just threw me for a loop. But that's for another day. As far as this Cowboys game goes and how the Raiders go, this is just another one of those games where you just throw away. But it feels like a lot of these teams around the NFL are having these games as well. And I can preach all I want about the same things that I've said all season long about how this team is going to fail with certain players on the field. And these are going to be the particular reasons why they don't win a Super Bowl and it's holding them back. It was very apparent in this football game. Terrence Steele has COVID now, so he won't play on Thursday. It'll be Lyle Collins at right tackle. Great. It should have been Lyle Collins from the very beginning. But in that Raiders game, not only did we have a terrible performance out of Terrence Steele, who had to cover Max Crosby, and if he got bull rushed, it was not even a competition. Not only did you have that poor performance out of Steele, you had an offensive line that was getting switched out every few drives. You know, one drive you have Terrence Steele out there, and one drive you have Lyle Collins out there, one drive you have Connor Williams out there, one drive you have Connor McGovern out there. It made no sense. There's no continuity with that offensive line right now. Nothing's working for them because they're just trying to piece it all together when in the end, it should be your best 5 guys out there. Right now, your best 5 guys are Lyle, Zach, Biotish, for just because you don't have another center, Connor McGovern, and Tyron Smith. You've been dealing with the injuries of Tyron Smith for the last few months. You've been dealing with this whole dramatic novella that is the Lyle Collins, Terrence Steele scenario about who should be the starter, and Lyle Collins just being the odd man out in this. And for me, it's the clear choice to put Lyle Collins at right tackle. So maybe this is a blessing in disguise. You know, I wish nothing but the best for Terrence Steele and his family. Hopefully he's okay. Hopefully he's healthy and he doesn't have any problematic issues with COVID. But for the play and the betterment of this football team, it is best for Lyle Collins to be out there. Then you have all the injuries, the COVID situations with the wide receivers. Zeke's hurt. Your defense, it is what it is because you didn't make any improvement on them. And you have Randy Gregory and you have DeMarcus Lawrence. You have them on the IR list. And really right now, your only good player is Micah Parsons. And yet he's trying the best that he can. But all in all, when you have Anthony Brown as your second best corner, you're going to have problems. And I've said this time and time before. When your right tackle is Terrence Steele, there is a problem there. When you have Lyle Collins on the bench. When you didn't make an effort to go get an interior lineman, whether that's offensively or defensively on that line, and you didn't go out and get another cornerback or made a trade for a cornerback, these are the repercussions of your actions, which is Anthony Brown is going to get cooked. And I don't care how much you want to talk about how the refs cost them that game and how these pass interference calls are going. You adjust and you change things. When you have someone better than Anthony Brown on the roster, and you could have made that happen with a trade, with a signing earlier in the season, when you knew after week 1 that Anthony Brown is a liability, you made the choice to say, no, we're not going to make a change. We are happy with Anthony Brown as CB2. Okay. And you know what? Credit to Anthony Brown because for a lot of these games this season, more likely than not, he has played good. He has played sometimes better than Trevon Diggs. And that's not a good thing to say, but it's the reality of it, right? But you're going to have games like this because Anthony Brown is not good enough to stand up against some of the better talent in the NFL at wide receiver. I am not okay with him going into the playoffs against better offensive teams like the Green Bay Packers, like the Rams, like the Bucks. Do you really want Anthony Brown to be your second cornerback against Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin? No, no, and no to every single one of the questions that you are asking or are eventually going to ask about Anthony Brown. All in all, I don't want Terrence Steele. I don't want Anthony Brown on the field. So, for the amount of times that I've said this on the podcast and I sound like a broken record, these are the games that you're going to have because you are okay with having these guys on the field. You feel comfortable with them being on the field. And no matter what happens, no matter how bad they're playing on the offensive line and giving up pressures and hits, no matter how many deep passes, no matter how many touchdowns you're giving up, if you're Anthony Brown, or penalties, they're still going to go with Anthony Brown at that position. They can't switch anybody out because there's no one to switch it with. Who are you going to switch it out with? No one. You have no one because you made that choice. You made the choice of not getting anybody else. So you can say those pass interference calls were bogus, they were weak. Cool. I'm fine with that. I can agree with you on a lot of those calls, especially the last one. Especially the last one that meant a lot in that game. That was not a pass interference call. But when you know that those refs are going to be really strict and nitpick every single little thing that you're doing, and now you have the attention on you because of the amount of penalties that you have, and you don't make an adjustment, you don't change anything. They really didn't do anything differently on defense either. You're lucky that Darren Waller wasn't on the field. And by the way, if you haven't seen that injury video that I did on the Cowboys and how these opponents are getting banged up after every single play, or not every game against the Cowboys, well, it's a continuation because in the Raiders game, Darren Waller went out and he wasn't in a factor in this game whatsoever for 3/4 of the game. Yet with Zay Jones, who was the best receiver on the field for the Raiders for most of this time, maybe Hunter Renfrow, Anthony Brown couldn't cover Zay Jones. Zay Jones is the threatening weapon in this Raiders offense, and Anthony Brown couldn't stop him. That's the reality of it, ladies and gentlemen. So here we are. Like the Raiders game was just doesn't make any sense, and there's no point to really talk about it in detail because I don't think this is going to matter in 4 weeks. I don't think this is going to matter once all these guys come back from being banged up, from being injured. Okay? All I'm going to say about this Raiders game is that this felt like a 2020 Dallas Cowboys team. This is a Jason Garrett type of team right now. That they're going to make the excuses, and they are so hard on themselves that it just breaks them. You know, they're so confused and they're so pressured on themselves to perform that it hurts them in the end and they shoot themselves in the foot. The Raiders had no business winning this football game. You can make the excuse that the Chiefs game was just not going to go the Cowboys' way because the Chiefs are just damn good right now. They're finding their groove and they look like they're in Super Bowl form once again, right? We can all agree on that. Nothing was stopping that offense. I don't think even some of the best defensive teams in all of football could have stopped the Chiefs at home that Sunday afternoon. You can't say the same thing about being at home against the Raiders that were 5-5. They are on a 3-game losing streak with an interim head coach, and yet you got out-coached, outplayed, out-strategized, out-game planned, and outplayed in every single aspect of this game. The things that you can control on the field, you failed at as a coaching staff and as players. That's my biggest takeaway from this. Discipline is nothing right now for the Dallas Cowboys. There is no discipline whatsoever with this football team. 14 penalties. There was 28 accepted penalties in this football game. 28. I go back to that TikTok. I go back to that clip that you guys saw a few weeks ago where we spoke about how this refereeing, these officiating crews, officials are going to ruin the NFL season. We're going to get to a point at the end of the season, whether it's playoffs or to the Super Bowl, the most important games of the year, and this was one of them. This is a Thanksgiving game that millions of people are going to watch. I mean, it's the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. You're going to have eyes on the screen at all times because no one else is playing. No matter if you hate the Cowboys or not, you're going to watch this game because it's Thanksgiving and it's football. You're going to watch it because it's the only game on. And you're going to either cheer for the Cowboys or you're going to jeer the Cowboys. you're going to have a lot of eyes on the product. And when you have the refs become a factor in this game and try to take TV time and try to get their 15 minutes of fame because they think they're doing the right thing, but they're only making this thing worse by making it more nitpicking and more anal about every single thing that has to happen in this game to go correctly, and it's only making it worse. These are the types of negative effects you're going to have. These are the types of games that people are just going to have a sour taste in their mouths. And at the end of the year, when we look back at the season, it's going to be a disaster and it's going to be forgettable because so many people are going to be disgusted at the fact that you are officiating these games like this. 28 penalties. No, I don't care if they're holding every single play. I don't care if it's pass interference every single play. You can't have 28 penalties in this game. You can't have 28 penalties, period. That can't happen. You have a job. I get that. But when you're overdoing it, at some point, you got to be more subjective, and you're being subjective. We can't use the argument of like, well, we can't let referees be subjective when it comes to calls. You're doing it. You're doing it with these taunting calls. You're doing it with these personal foul, unnecessary roughness calls. You're making those refs make the call. You're forcing them to make a game time decision. That shouldn't be the case. You should use your what's the word? Oh my God, I blanked on a word. You should be using like the replays. You should be using the guys in New York. You should be communicating. But at some point, let's say at halftime, and you already have like 10 penalties, probably over 13 penalties between both teams at halftime, I think you should communicate, say, guys, ease up a little bit. I know they're holding, but it's ruining the game. It's ruining the flow of this game right now. And if people want to tune in, let it go both ways. You know, if both teams are holding and pass interference is all over the place, both sides, don't call it. Let's just go. Let's just play football. You're ruining the flow. You're ruining the vibe. And it's just a continuation of just bad juju when it comes to these teams. And I'm not talking about Smith-Schuster. 28 penalties. These teams were both 3 and 13 on third down. Who the fuck wants to watch a 6 and 26 third down efficiency? Absolutely terrible. I mean, unacceptable. There was no turnovers in this game, which was surprising. But it really didn't matter. I mean, it was such a bad game to watch. It really was. I mean, when you put Bears and Lions first, and then you end with a blowout from the Bills. What a horrible day of football, am I right? But overall, this is my takeaway from this game that I think is impactful going forward. Because I'm going to get to a more glass half full conversation at the end of this podcast. But first, I want to talk about what things are troubling for this Cowboys team after the Raiders game. Look, I said it before, control the things that you can control. I know you can't just suddenly burst with passing yards and big plays down the field when your best receiver right now in this game is Noah Brown. Shockingly, the game plan was to get Noah Brown involved and not get Cedric Wilson or Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup was like, he had 5 receptions for 106 yards, a lot of chunk plays, but it never felt like he was a part of the game plan all along. It felt like when they had to force the ball, they went to Michael Gallup because they could trust him the most. But after that, what Kellen Moore is doing in these losses is concerning to me, and it's concerning to this coaching staff because when the Cowboys are flowing, when they're winning and they feel confident, they will adjust. They will adjust as they go throughout the game. Even if things are going correctly, they will kind of morph it and change it up. With the play calls, if they're gaining 5 to 6 yards on a first down run, well, in the games that they win, they typically don't do that again for another few drives. You know, they'll shake it up. They'll go for the big play because they know that they have the confidence to do so and they feel good about it. And then they're just rolling, you know? Everything's going right for this Cowboys team, and yet with the changes, it doesn't feel like it changes the flow. Defensively, it's usually that first drive that gets them, and then after that, they adjust and say, okay, this is what we got to do now based on that first drive. And it made them successful in that first drive, but now they won't have the same success. Now they have to adjust because we're making those adjustments. And now they're thinking about everything they have to do after that first drive. Let's look at the losses. Against the Chiefs, against the Raiders, against the Broncos. The Bucs game, I wouldn't really count the Bucs game because they were good offensively. But it feels like in these losses and against all AFC West teams right now, other than the Chargers game, it feels like they just stick to one game plan and they don't change it. And everything is up to that one plan A. If that plan A doesn't work, well, we're shit out of luck. You know, it's just not our day. That's very concerning, and I see that very apparently with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, in these last few games, in these losses, look back at every single one of those drives and tell me that not at least half of those drives starts with a first down run up the middle. Under center, Dak Prescott, kill, give it to Zeke up the middle. He gets 2 yards. I guarantee you that the rate, the percentages of the amount of times they do that on first down on their drives in these losses is more than half. And then how many drives end up in 3 and outs? I counted like 4 or 5 in this game alone. And that's not counting the Broncos game. That's not counting the Chiefs game. The amount of times this team goes 3 and out is embarrassing. It's not going to hold up. It's not holding up against a 500 team in the Raiders. So how is it going to work out with the Green Bay Packers that are playing great defense right now? How is it going to hold up against the Bucs? How is it going to hold up against the Rams? You know, you can't be doing this. You can't. And it's all on Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore has to make the adjustment. Why? How come we notice that the 1st and 10 run up the middle is working against these teams that we're beating, and yet you change it? However, you don't change it in these losses. How come you make the argument that in these losses where you say we have to establish physicality and domination on the front end with the offensive line, we have to win those battles up front. Yet, when you do win those battles up front, you don't make it a key or a focus to run it up the middle. In those games, you are so creative. You use different formations. And you're using different formations in these losses as well. But when you lose, that's when you say we have to be more aggressive up front. Well, I'm here to tell you, Kellen and Mike, that sometimes you're going to get beaten up front. And sometimes you're not going to win those battles every single time, especially with Terrence Steele, especially with Connor McGovern still trying to find his groove in this offensive line, and especially with Tyler Biadasz that seems not strong enough to play center. You're able to do that if you had 5 Tyron Smiths across the line, if you had 5 Zach Martins across the line. Of course, in 2014, yeah, you were able to do that. That was your game plan, is to just win up front, and the rest is cake. The rest is just W's. You don't have that luxury anymore. And yet your mentality is, yes, I have that ability. No, you don't. And throughout the game, it takes a special person and a very unique person in a coaching staff to realize and to swallow their pride. And there's not a lot of swallowing of prides in the Cowboys organization. Just look at the front office. But it takes a special individual and a special coach to say, guys, it's not working. Let's go to plan B. Sometimes you just got to do it. And this was the game to do it. Because this was a sorry-ass excuse of 33 points. I'm sorry, but these are the weakest 33 points I've seen the Cowboys score. It didn't matter whether you scored 33 points at the end or not. It's during the game how is it going? How is momentum going your way? It's not. And in the end, you scored 14 in the fourth quarter. It doesn't matter when you played another 45 minutes of bad football. You can't score 6. You can't score 6 twice in 2 quarters. You got to score more than a touchdown in a game or in a quarter. You have to do it. You have to just realize that running up the middle on 1st and 10 for 2 yards from a dozen times, it's not working. Throwing a screen behind the line of scrimmage when Dalton Schultz can't block with a damn today, maybe it's not the right call. It's not working. Dalton Schultz was drafted to be a blocking tight end and has grown into more than that. He couldn't block. He couldn't block at all in this game. He missed so many blocks and he looked so lost out there. Control the things that you can control. You can't control Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Zeke being injured. You can't control Randy Gregory, DeMarcus Lawrence being out. You can't control those things. But what you can control is the play on the field at that very moment. Make sure that they're disciplined. Make sure they're not making stupid mistakes. If the other team's just better, then okay. I will take that. I will humbly take those losses against better football teams. But I guarantee you, if you would have just come into this game and said, I know we're missing a lot, I know we're missing our key players, but just do your assignment that we practice all week long, do the things that we taught you throughout practice this week, and then we're just going to be prepared for a plan B, a plan C, in case the plan A doesn't work. And I guarantee you that even with all these injuries and with all the problems that we're having, that we are better than a 5-5 Raiders team on a 3-game losing streak with an interim head coach. An interim head coach out-coached Mike McCarthy, who has been there all year long. I get it that the coach has been there and has been an assistant coach for most of the year alongside John Gruden. And I know that he knows everything about this organization from top to bottom. But I've seen what the Cowboys are capable of against bad football teams, and the Raiders are a bad football team. They're not making the playoffs. They're not getting out of that division. They'll be lucky to get a wild card, but really, I don't expect them to. Because they're going to play better football teams later on, especially in that division. And they're going to lose those football games because the other football teams are better than the Raiders. There's a lot of football teams better than the Raiders, and the Cowboys are one of them. And they should have beaten the Raiders. But guess what? They use those excuses of missing all those players. And even then, that's not acceptable when you have your coaching staff, Mike McCarthy, Kellen Moore, Dan Quinn, all there. I know you were missing some coaches from the COVID list, but you are still a better football team. You're more talented. You're more well-equipped. You should have won that football game, and you shouldn't have 14 fucking penalties. But guess what? When you have Terrence Steele, you have Anthony Brown, and you have no other pass rusher other than Micah Parsons, these are the results that you're going to get. So with that said, this is a throwaway game. I'm not going to say that for every loss because there's got to be things that you got to learn. There's a lot of things in this game that the Cowboys just won't learn from because it's just how it is now. It's the players that you're using. They're not good enough, but guess what? You really don't have any other choice. So now looking at it from a positive outlook. Yes, I'm going to mention that they had a lot of players out in this football game. They had coaching staff, players out from COVID, CeeDee Lamb out with a concussion. They played 4 days after just getting dismantled by the Chiefs. That's not fair to any football team. I don't wish a Thursday night game on any other football team in the NFL. I don't like Thursday night games. And if you're going to play on Thanksgiving, don't make them play the Sunday before. Make them have a bye week or have them play the previous Thursday. Something's got to change about these Thursday night games because it's just not fair to any football team. I'm not making this excuse for the Cowboys because the Raiders did have to play. But guess what? I don't think the Raiders fans like to see Darren Waller go out due to injury, and it had to do with maybe playing 4 days before. That's not okay. Imagine if Roger Goodell had to play Sunday and Thursday right now. I bet he'd say, damn, that's tough. Why do you make your players do it? How is that fair at all? But, that's just, it's not going to go anywhere, right? It's never going to change because it brings in more money. It's all about money. So it's not fair for any of these teams to play 4 days after they just played on Sunday. And then you also got to consider that the Cowboys have all these injuries, have all these problems with COVID and the IR report. Look, there's still a lot of football to be played. There's still another month to go. This is not the Cowboys that went on that winning streak. This is not the Cowboys that were explosive on offense and were making plays defensively by making turnovers. Yes, that is very apparent, and I'm being Captain Obvious here. It just seems like you can't judge the Cowboys right now when they have all these injuries. Can we make the case about the Tennessee Titans right now as well? Because they just got beaten the brakes off of by the Patriots. But they're missing a lot of their players. I mean, they don't have Derrick Henry, their best player on the team. They don't have A.J. Brown, their second best player on the team. They don't have Julio Jones, who everyone thinks is a great wide receiver. I don't think so anymore. But guess what? That's another receiver that is threatening to that offense. Their defense has been one of the primary reasons why they've gone on such a great run and been one of the best teams in the AFC. They have their injuries as well. So how can we really consider or I guess judge the team when they're not 100%? No team's going to be 100%, but when like literally more than half of your playmakers on this team are on the IR list or on COVID list, how can you really say that this is the Cowboys you're going to see in December, in 4 weeks, when you play the Arizona Cardinals or when you make the playoffs and you play in the wild card game? You really think that this is the same team that's going to show up there? I don't think so. I think the Cowboys are definitely better than that because I've seen better. I've seen this Cowboys team perform. And guess what? It's because they had those other players on the field. I've seen Randy Gregory be on the field and make plays. That's one of the reasons why they create turnovers, is because Randy Gregory gets to the quarterback. They haven't been able to get to the quarterback. Oh, well, yeah, because they don't have Randy Gregory. They don't have DeMarcus Lawrence ever since week 1. Lyle Collins should be on the field. They haven't had him on the field. So I think once he gets on the field and they say like, oh, he's actually better. Well, yeah, because you never put him on the field. We are more than halfway through the season, but guess what? It's 17 games. It's 17 games, and we're through 11 of them. You mean to tell me that this is going to be the same football team we're going to see for the next 6 weeks? I don't think so. They finally get a week in between games. That helps too. And do we go into the Saints game and say the same thing about like, oh, well, they're missing a lot of players and plus everyone's on the COVID list? Yeah. So you know what? If the Saints win that game, okay, cool. You know what? I get it, because I'm not going to get frustrated over something that it's meaningless. It's meaningless right now. What matters is 2 to 3 weeks from now, when you get everybody back. When you get Neville Gallimore back, Randy Gregory back, DeMarcus Lawrence back. When you get all those guys and you finally feel like, all right, we're back. Everyone's healthy. As long as we don't have major injuries going forward, this is where you should really judge us. Judge the book by its cover based on these games, not by those. Because we still have a better sample size of the Cowboys playing great with all of those guys on the field, when we only have a small sample size of 3 games that they've played terrible in. And we look at the NFL, we look at all these great teams, everybody has bad games, really bad games. People are in love with the Ravens. They love Lamar Jackson, and they love everything that they're doing. They really consider them as contenders in the AFC. There's plenty of games to go through the Ravens season and say they played bad. Miami's game, and that was a Thursday night game. Coincidence? Yeah. You know, the Rams. You know, we 2 weeks ago, a lot of us were saying that this team is going to be the Super Bowl contenders. They should win it all. They're on a 3-game losing streak, and they look bad. They do not look good at all. The Chiefs, they went months looking terrible, and now they're finding their form. So when it comes down to December, that last push, that's what matters to me. That's where you play those NFC East teams, and how you play them when you have everybody back. Let's judge them for that. Let's criticize or constructively criticize this Cowboys team based on those games. I can't really judge what this Cowboys team is right now based on these last 2 games in less than a week and the 3 out of the last 4 games, because I mean, like, there is excuses, and no team should make excuses. It's just a matter of how you bounce back from that. And when you say, all right, we feel good about where we are, and things start to spiral out of control more, that's my issue. That's where I feel like this team doesn't have it anymore. And they maybe have peaked too early. I don't feel that way. I genuinely feel like this team is going to be dangerous going into the playoffs, but there is a big if to it. I think there's a plenty of things to go off of based on history and based on what we know about the Cowboys that are major red flags. Major red flags that will hurt them in the end. Right now, I can't say that these 2 games are giving me very negative feelings about the Cowboys season, about all their flukes, their nobodies, they didn't prove anything, they're the same old Cowboys. I can't say that. I really can't say that, and maybe it's just the run that they went on earlier in the season. But I genuinely feel like this team is different and special in its own way. That doesn't mean they're winning the Super Bowl. I am not there at all right now. I definitely don't think the Cowboys can win a Super Bowl right at this very moment. But I feel like the only teams that could win a Super Bowl right now are the Packers and the Pats. Those are the only teams that I feel like can really win a Super Bowl based on how they're playing right now. But I couldn't have said that 4 weeks ago. Definitely not the Patriots. Maybe not the Packers. I think there were contenders, but they are playing the best football right now. And that can change. Cowboys were playing the best football 4 weeks ago. That changed. So, right now, what we got to focus on as a Cowboys team is manage the things that you have right now. Just damage control. Damage control is discipline. Get back to the basics. Do your assignment and do it correctly. Get through this hard bump on the road. And I guarantee you don't go with more major injuries. I mean, sitting Zeke would probably help a lot. Amari Cooper, get vaccinated, please. But that's your choice. CeeDee Lamb, you got a concussion. There's nothing really you can do about that because that's just a in-the-moment type of injury. And you just hope that Randy Gregory, DeMarcus Lawrence, Neville Gallimore, and all these different guys defensively can stay healthy. One of the things that has plagued the Cowboys all these years is staying healthy. They just can't do it. What's weird about this year is that a lot of these injuries are happening in practice. Like a lot of calf strains. I know the Dak one happened during the game, but a lot of these injuries are happening off the field, sort of, off the game field, more on the practice field. As long as those injuries start to just wear off, and it's going to be a long season, so, I mean, you get the Thursday night games out of the way, so that's good. Just damage control. At this moment in time, the Cowboys are going to be just fine. They are still a very good football team, in my opinion. They're not playing like it right now, and I know that. And a lot of people are just going to give up on the Cowboys because they just assume that this is going to be a reminder of what happened years ago, last year. I'm saying that the things that are going to stop the Cowboys are not what's happening right now. In a way. I think it's more going to be of what I mentioned earlier in the season about having Anthony Brown, Terrence Steele, guys like that you didn't want to improve and find a replacement for when you had the ability to do so by trading draft picks, trading players, and you didn't do so. You didn't make any moves like the Rams are, like the Bucks are. You're just kind of sticking with what you have and saying 5 years down the road, we're going to be unstoppable. I don't have 5 years to wait. I want to win now. That's my issue with this team. And I feel like Mike McCarthy's kind of laid back. He's the same way. He's like, as long as I win some football games and stay here, I'll see 5 years from now. I'll be here 5 years from now. As long as I keep doing what I'm doing. It's worked. I've had 7 games of wins to prove my point of like, we're going to be just fine. And only 4 of them, maybe 3 of them, really, are a bad look on me. But overall, we're going to win the division. These other teams are so bad that I don't really have to try that hard. Mike McCarthy and his decisions that are very similar to the front office decisions are what's going to hurt this team in the end. But right now, what's really hurting this team is the injuries, not having a lot of guys on the field, and not feeling themselves. Because they feel like, since we don't have these guys, we really can't do what we can. Or what we should be doing. What we can be doing. We can't be explosive on offense if we don't have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Well, you're just making that excuse because you have other weapons to choose from. Aaron Rodgers didn't make that excuse on Thursday night against Arizona. He was throwing to fucking like some guy named Quinius St. Brown. You're telling me that St. Brown's better than Michael Gallup? I'm not saying that. And yet he made it work. He made it work with even his best tight end being out. In Tanyan. He made it work. The great teams make it work. They get through it. But they don't just lay back and say, once we get past this, we'll be fine. No. You can't just let everything go until things go your way. Be aggressive. Be who you genuinely want to be. As an aggressive, physical offense that's explosive, and a defense that is going to make you work for everything that you got. That doesn't change with players going in and out. That's got to stay fundamentally no matter who's on the field. And that's the problem with the Cowboys right now. But I know that it's going to get better. And in the end, what's going to hurt them is stuff that was way before the season started. It's not what's happening in the moment. So next up, the Saints. We'll talk about it later this week. Probably talk about it tomorrow or the next day. Sorry for not posting a lot last week. I went out of town and didn't have my setup, so I apologize for that, and I'm sorry for the late review on the Raiders game. But we'll come back this week, and we'll go back to our normal schedule and talk about some things. Winners and losers comes back this week as well, in a crazy NFL week once again. But yeah, so we'll come back. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Episode 258, and we will see you next time on the Bubba Lutz Sports Podcast.
Yeah, hold on. Tell me who's your top 5 quarterbacks right now, dead or alive, huh? And how much do you care about a ring if the best player got carried by the team? Now, would you